The Holy Land. What a place with tons of culture and even more history. It was truly an amazing experience to travel to the country of Israel. For 10 days, almost 80 members of my church, including my parents and I, walked in the footsteps of Jesus. We went to multiple sites per day that pertain to different stories of the messages of the Bible or pertain to Jewish history in some way, shape, or form. We went through discovery tours and cruises, and we had some amazing tour guides and bus drivers, and we were led by my head pastor at Mount Vernon Baptist Church. I think that's all the background I can give you. I guess it's time to just get into it, what happened, what we did. So I knew I didn't want to make a super highly edited video for this trip because most of it was just historic ruins and whatnot, and not the best setting for Zoom transitions, but I did take tons of videos of the land in each of the sites that we went to. So I wanted to create this atmosphere of Israel where if you haven't been there, then you get a better idea of what it feels like to be there. But I'm not going to do a history lesson either. Instead, I will periodically do some voiceover for different parts and explain a couple things and give you my overall thoughts and feelings about the particular sites. All right, so we met at the church, drove up to Dulles International Airport in DC, a 10-hour flight from Dulles to Istanbul, Turkey, and then a 5-hour layover, and then a 2-hour flight to Tel Aviv, Israel. The first night we stayed in Tel Aviv at an amazing hotel right on the Mediterranean Sea. My bedroom is so cool, I could see the city straight ahead and then the Mediterranean on my right. At the hotel finally, I'm gonna get some dinner that's actually in the fridge. I'm gonna go to bed. Maybe I'll give you a tour in the morning, maybe tonight. We'll see. Alright, so we're here in Israel. Not exactly too sure where we are. We're right outside Tel Aviv, but other than that, I'm not too sure. Look at this view. It's kind of overblown a little. That's okay. The bright sun. This is the Sea of Galilee. I mean the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean Sea. Is that crazy? Okay, day one, baby, let's go. First we went to Caesarea by the Sea, not Caesarea Philippi. We'll get there in a second. A city mentioned in the Bible which held King Herod's palace right on the coast. So right off, we're walking within the ruins of Roman architecture. All right, we got Clayton Cornell, associate pastor at Mount Vernon. What would we do today? What was our flight like? What was everything going on before this?
The flight was good. It was a long trip. We had a 5-hour layover in Istanbul. We're good. Got to the hotel late. We got some good power nap. Got up, and so we just finished Caesarea by the Sea. We are on our way, ultimately going to Mount Carmel.
What are we going to do there?
We're going to see where Elijah called down fire from heaven.
Are we going to see where it was scorched?
Sure.
Let's go. Next, we got the fortress of the city of Megiddo. Already, I'm having information overload, so there's no way I can repeat everything that the tour guide said, but apparently, according to the Bible, this is where the final battle will take place. Personally, I think it would make for a good Call of Duty map, so I'm just going to have to agree with Jesus on this one. Then we went to Mount Carmel, and you could see so much of Israel from this one mountaintop, and this is the beginning of my understanding of Israel as a whole. You see, back when the Roman Catholics inhabited this part of the world, they put churches on almost every major site described in the Bible and declared it holy, turning these places like Mount Carmel perfect place for a Catholic church to open up alongside a gift shop and vending machines and public restroom. It was a bit of a culture shock. Mount Carmel is perfect because this is actually where the prophet Elijah contested the worshippers of Baal. So you start wondering where exactly were these altars created up on this mount, where things actually happened in the Bible. We drove to the Mount of the Precipice, where Jesus may or may not have jumped off the cliff, and there was an overlook of Israel as well. But it also looked over Nazareth, the town where Jesus was from. It was so weird to be told, yeah, Jesus played in the streets of this town. And in your view, you see a Pizza Hut and 4 iPhone repair shops. And the culture shocks I didn't really get over until 75% of the way through the trip. You'll hear me say that a lot. We drove through Nazareth and Cana on our way back to our new hotel where we would stay for the next 2 days until we moved on to a third and final hotel. A lot of moving around. The hotel we stayed at was right on the Sea of Galilee in the town of Tiberias, and I love this hotel. I should just be an Israeli hotel reviewer, honestly, at this point. So that takes us to day 2. Sheesh, already day 2. All right, so we started out by going up to Caesarea Philippi, where the disciple Philip was from. And what we saw there was this pagan temple of Pan. So we are 2 for 2 on starting the day off with villains of the Bible. Seemed a little spooky. It was the site of Peter's great confession in Jesus asking the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" Drawing this connection to this city overrun by pagan worship in biblical times, and it being the very place Jesus asked his disciples to affirm their dedication to him. Next, we went to St. Peter's Church, and like I said, another church. But this is most likely the site where Jesus actually stood and told the disciples to put their nets on the other side of the boat, or the site where Jesus told Peter to feed his lambs. And this is where the idea of, oh, did this actually happen right here? And our tour guides were very honest with us in saying that many of the sites that we visit could very much likely be the place that Jesus actually visited, but as much as they could be the place, that's how much they couldn't be the place. Because us modern day Christians in the year 2023 just do not know exactly. I really appreciated their honesty, but their honesty doesn't discredit the trip, because the reason we are Christian is that we do not worship idols or specific places or specific statues or specific items. Rather, we have a much more personal relationship with Jesus Christ. We don't have to put a church right where Jesus was standing as long as we sincerely recognize that Jesus was a real person and use this land as the place of his ministry. Then who cares where the exact foot was where he stepped? So after I had all these ideas running through my head, it really helped me view this trip in a much more nuanced way. So the next place we went to was Capernaum, which declared itself as the town of Jesus. Like, bump your brakes, Capernaum, get in line behind Nazareth and Bethlehem. At Capernaum, we saw a traditional Jewish town with a synagogue and a church legitimately built over top of the supposed house where Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law. And like I said, this might not be the exact house of Peter's mother-in-law, but Jesus actually did stand and teach in this synagogue of Capernaum. And finally, we ended our information-filled day with getting baptized in the Jordan River. And this was super cool, physically doing exactly what Jesus did. A dove actually did come down from the heavens when I went under. It was great. I initially wasn't going to get baptized because my baptism was special to me, and I don't need a second one to reaffirm my faith. However, when am I going to get this chance ever again? And my parents paid for the entrance fee, so I'll take what I can get. And to end the day, my parents and our friend went down to the town of Tiberias after dinner. This was a little side mission because it was actually not part of the curriculum we were a part of. Like, our group was back at the hotel and we just had a couple hours to kill before we needed to go to bed, and I loved it. I love going down to the city and being part of the city or town of other countries, doing what the locals do, just walking along the Sea of Galilee with an ice cream as the sun goes down. Day 3, things are starting to ramp up. We're doing and seeing things that I legitimately thought I'd never seen my entire life. Starting out with a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee. Yes, that Sea of Galilee. Super, super cool to actually feel like a disciple riding along the choppy waters on a boat. Granted, all we did was go in a circle, but it was cool nonetheless. All right, Clayton, what's happening?
So this morning we had breakfast, and that's like all the other breakfasts. There's so many other fruits and vegetables here in Israel. So now we're on a boat on the Sea of Galilee, and it is very unique to the stories that Jesus made on the Sea of Galilee and in the storms. Unique perspective.
What are we doing later today? What are we doing later today? Come on, I don't even know. What are we doing?
Today we're going to be Magdala and Ben Shian, which is a huge, it's an example of what a big city would look like all the way there.
Beautiful. We headed to the Mount of Beatitudes, which at first I had no idea what this was until I realized the Beatitudes is a section in the Sermon on the Mount, which means we are in a place where the biggest sermon of all time took place. Again, there was a Roman Catholic church, but at least this one was fancy, and there were gardens and places to pray and places to gather and visit, and of course a snack bar. Magdala didn't hit me as much as it did my mom because she loves the story of Mary Magdalene, but seeing the ruins of a normal Jewish town in biblical times was cool because there's a synagogue, and I thought all synagogues were these massive structures, but no, this one was a fairly small floor plan of a Jewish synagogue with tiling and columns. There's a cool church in the back of the area that had a very detailed wall tiled art, and out front of the church was a statue of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, driving home the point that Jesus supported women all throughout his ministry. And of course, Tom felt the need to insert himself in history as third person in this historical art, of course. And so we're only halfway through day 3 and I told you this day was insane. Next was a kind of goofy museum of a 2,000-year-old boat discovered by a fisherman a handful of years ago. And that's kind of when I got the idea of why we're even here in the first place. Yeah, we can see all these old historic ruins, cities and towns, and we're constantly told that the people back in the biblical times used tools and boats and fishing nets and whatnot. And here we were, day 3, 2023, standing right in front of a 2,000-year-old boat that could be very well used by the people back in biblical times for fishing, a profession of many of the disciples participated in. And within the context that we just rode around the Sea of Galilee that held like 80 people with room to spare, it was cool to see what a boat back then looked like. Then we saw my favorite thing of the trip, something I thought I'd never see, the ruins of Bet Shean, a real Roman city. There was this long road that seemed to go on for miles all the way down to the base of a mountain directly ahead, and on both sides there were amphitheaters, bathhouses, Roman quarters. This whole area reminded me of the Rome scene in Spaceship Earth, and putting that comparison into where I was walking, I legitimately felt like a Roman citizen walking down the street, coming from some time at the bathhouse to a public beheading, the perfect Roman day. That's what I felt like. Seeing how this whole place was laid out was really cool, and I really wish we could play like airsoft or paintball here, but honestly I'd probably just get lost because of how big it was. And that was the last official thing of the day, but today was the day we go to Jerusalem, the holy city, a place that people have been wanting for hundreds of thousands of years. At least 10 people groups want to take this place over, the place of Solomon's temple on the Temple Mount, the place where we would stay for the rest of the trip. Here we were, Jerusalem. Day 4, halfway through, and today was a good, slow-paced day. We only did about like 3 things, and that's probably because day 5 we went right back into training for a triathlon. But today we started off with Masada, truly a city on a hill or a mountain, or how about a palace on a mountain? This was King Herod's massive palace that consisted of gondolas, bathhouses, guardhouses, you name it, it was here, all looking over the Dead Sea. And here's the funny thing, according to literal history, King Herod never even came here. It was all built for him, every single last brick, but he never even stepped foot in Masada. That's just crazy. Driving through the Israeli desert, it's certainly a sight to see, but only a sight to see once, because everywhere you look is just sand and rocks. That's only until you get to the Dead Sea Scrolls Museum, buffet, restaurant, skincare gift shop. No, but for real, this gift shop was insanely expensive. Dead Sea mud masks and stuff that you can find at your local Target. But there's this one guy who was peeling off the mud mask off my face with a magnet. Look at this. That's unreal. Kind of looked like a symbiote coming off of me or something. Just call me Venom. Anyways, let's get to the real reason why we're here. The Dead Sea Scrolls. I actually held one in my hands. We only saw the caves where they were found from afar. I wanted to go to the caves, but we didn't have time. I was too busy getting sick pictures like this. Pretty cool stuff. And of course, we needed to go to the local beach, but this is any old local beach. This is the lowest place on earth. No, silly, not my in-laws' house. You're supposed to laugh. No, we swam in the Dead Sea, where there is so much salt and other natural materials in the water, making it so dense that you can just float on the water. Something I've never experienced. The water legit felt like a couch. Like the water was actually pushing me up towards the sky rather dragging me down to the muddy, slimy ground. And yes, of course, I put the muddy, slimy ground all over me. I think after every rinse, I gave them like 10 years on my lifespan. And it's so weird because this is like a legitimately commercialized beach in the middle of the desert. Truly a surreal experience. I'm probably going to say that a lot for day 5 because tomorrow is the day where it all goes down. The Temple Mount, Wailing Wall, City of David. Day 5, big day. We start the day off doing what any other tour group in Israel would do, riding a camel. Donna had the time of her life. We looked over the city of Jerusalem, looking over the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock and the surrounding walls. Next was actually going inside the walls. And yeah, I'm telling you, big day ahead. We walked all about the old city of Jerusalem within the walls, throughout the different quarters, throughout the mounds of security until we reached the Temple Mount. This is the place of the temple where a lot of the Old Testament is dedicated to, the specific dimensions and architecture and decorations. But what we really focused on was the Dome of the Rock, which is actually physically replaced Solomon's temple. It's a Muslim shrine dedicated to their religion. So a lot of this was imagining this beautiful temple in the middle of the Holy Land with the Holy of Holies and other items described in the Bible. This large flat stone area is the place where the new temple will be built, where Jesus will come back to earth. Kind of crazy that I was standing in the past, present, and future history all in one place. We moved on from this Temple Mount over to the Western Wall, or the Wailing Wall, as others might know it as. This is a section of the original wall King Solomon had built around the Temple Mount that surrounded the temple. Most of the other walls have been contorted, broken down, or rusted of old age throughout the years. And this is the one original section of the wall that still stands, that Jews hold in high regard. I believed I'd heard of this place before until somebody told me this wasn't the Berlin Wall. That this was the Western Wall. There's a lot of walls in history, I guess, so that's when it clicked. So people of the Jewish faith would come up to this wall and pray out loud, or to themselves, read the Torah out loud, or to themselves, or just sit there and touch it, take pictures with it like my dad did. I felt super weird doing that because this was a place that I could tell was being held in high reverence, more than most of the churches that we had been to up until this point. But I hold a lot of the same traditional values with the Jews in the area, so I got over it. It was funny because you had to wear something on your head to go into this area, like a hat or a yarmulke, and they handed out reusable yarmulkes. But the ones that our group got kept flying off because of the wind, and they had to go chase it down. It was absolutely unreal. One more thing about this place is that they were separated by gender. Men went on the left side, and the women went on the right side. Just interesting, very, very interesting stuff to see. Next thing, we went down into the Israeli catacombs, the Western Wall tunnels. Now, I'm not going to lie, I didn't really understand the importance of this place, this piece of history. But what I did understand, that we were on the other side of the Western Wall, which meant we were actually inside the Temple Mount, underneath all of the stuff that was built over top, and there were tight corridors and areas and whatnot. I think that some of this area was actually above ground at one point, and that we were walking through ancient waterways, and throughout history of the constant construction and deconstruction, these passages were just eventually buried. There's a whole museum down here, so go check that out if to get more information. Then we went to a place pretty cool that I didn't understand 100%, and that's because we were at King David's palace. You know, David and Goliath, you know, David and Bathsheba. And of course, Bathsheba, the baddie, was talked about in this part of the trip. The reason I didn't understand it much was because of the Old Testament timeline. This was supposedly the area of Jerusalem outside the walls, mind you, where David built a town or a city with his palace right next to the walls of the Temple Mount. I had always thought that King David, and all the kings for that matter, had his quarters inside the walls of the city. So this is where the timeline kind of gets messed up for me. That's why I'm going through the Old Testament in my personal life. Like, why was David's palace and the city of David placed outside the city? The answers to these questions are probably just a Google search away. But these were my real thoughts as we were walking out to the balcony of this place. The same balcony David saw Bathsheba bathing from. Probably not the same, but at least we're in the same room or the same vicinity. We dove down to the catacombs once more, but this time we were told outright that these were water passages built to supply the water to the city of Jerusalem, built by King Hezekiah back in biblical times, promptly named Hezekiah's Tunnel.
Anybody in front of me ahead of us?
Yeah, Donna's up here somewhere.
This is crazy.
I literally took a wrong turn.
Now listen, this is the part of the show where I stop and say I couldn't care less about water tunnels or underground passageways. I wanted to live and breathe the Jewish culture and get to spend my time above ground, frolicking the streets of Jerusalem. But nope, we were risking our lives balancing on wooden planks through skin-tight tunnels. But these water passages are the same ones that supplied water to our next and final major stop of the day, the Pool of Siloam. This is where Jesus performed one of his miracles, healing the blind man, a story told to us in the Gospels. Connecting these history dots allowed me to finally break through this mental game I was playing with myself, trying to push through why so many of these quote-unquote holy places were riddled with snack stands and gift shops and commercialized almost to the point of unrecognizability. I don't even know if that's a word, but sounds good here. But when you take a step back and walk through the streets of Jerusalem and squeeze your way through the water tunnels, you start to understand that this is biblical history. These are all places grounded in scripture, and I get to step and touch and feel and smell and consume all of it. It was really weird to be stepping down into the water tunnels underneath the city of David, a place briefly talked about in the Bible, while hearing the Muslim call to prayer being played over the speakers from the town over. I got the point of the trip. I'm stepping through history with a better lens than just a surface level archaeology, but rather a deep and spiritual belief that these things actually happened and actually took place, no matter how big or how small the importance.
Somebody go.
So to cap off the huge day, after dinner, a group of us decided to stroll on down to the town of Jerusalem. Downtown, baby, the modern part of this city, because Jerusalem is actually a legitimate first world city. Israel is actually a first world country. So about 15 of us illegally used the metro and got off and just lived and breathed in the Jerusalem lifestyle. There were shops, there were restaurants, there's lights, there's umbrellas. This probably was actually my favorite part of the trip. I know I said that about the Roman city, but I've always loved impromptu experiences of a different country without time constraints and a tour guide. We frolicked around the city, got some baked goods and coffee, and just absorbed it all in, and I loved it. Even though we almost got lost and almost got arrested, but that's a story for another time. So day 6, here we are, second to last day. It's setting in that we're actually not the new residents of this country. We actually have to leave soon. But that certainly did not stop us from shopping. Well, before we went to a field outside the city of Bethlehem, and we'll get there, but our tour guide wanted to go off the beaten path literally, and we saw what a legitimate manger would have been and looked like a stone cold fortress. So this is actually the exact structure Jesus was born in. Crazy that we got to solve, but even crazier that it didn't have a Roman Catholic church over top of it, nor a gift shop nearby. I'm being facetious. It was cool to see what an actual manger looked like and would have been like and would have felt like. Then we went shopping, the perfect thing to do in the town of Bethlehem. We stayed there for like 2 hours at this one place, I kid you not. It was like all wood carvings and jewelry, and it was all expensive too. So those 3 things are not my cup of tea. But next we went to the Church of the Nativity. We walked through the streets of Bethlehem, sketchy people selling fake junk in the streets, and we waited so long to get in this church, or at least what we went to the church for. The church is the place where, quote unquote, they believe Jesus was actually born and placed in a manger. Like this was it. It's crazy because I just saw where those things happened and it looked nothing like this. So somebody's got to be lying. It was interesting how holy and I guess lack for a better term, built up this area was. Intricate sculptures and imagery all plated with gold and gems to make it all seem holy and real and otherworldly. It's so interesting how the Roman Catholics view Jesus, yet in many aspects they worship Mary as much, in some circumstances more than Jesus, yet they all revere all of them in high admiration. Us, the Baptists, the correct religion. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. The more modern church definitely do not adhere to those dreamy and godly images and gold-plated structures. Rather, we focus on Christ as a relational being, a king of our lives and savior of the world, rather than worship every aspect of his human likeness. Not that one perspective is better than the other, but they're very, very different even within the same religion. Just interesting things to think about. These were all my thoughts, like going through, seeing everything. We then made a quick little stop at what Israel designates as the Shepherd's Fields, which is weird because the whole time we were walking on concrete and using nearby public restrooms. But yet again, you see that this area wants you to come to reflect on something meaningful, even if the place that you go to isn't actually the place where the meaningful things happened. To finish off the day, we did the best, most fun thing in the entire world, a Holocaust museum. The Yad Vashem Museum in Jerusalem. Now, I didn't get much video or pictures in the museum because they didn't let us. It was the rules. But I was able to sneak a couple videos here and there. So at first I was super confused why we were here, mostly because I fell asleep on the bus and then woke up in front of a Holocaust museum. But through the journey that we've been on so far, as you can tell, a lot of it isn't actually mentioned in the Bible. And even if it is, it's small and short mentions or sentences. All of the trip has been not just walking the footsteps of Jesus, but rather walking the footsteps of the Jewish nation. And you really can't talk about Jewish history without the Holocaust, a major, terrible historical event that almost led to the extinction of the Jewish people. And walking around the museum made me understand that, like it or not, it happened, and it is essential to learn about when learning about Jewish history. After the nice, awesome, amazing time at the Holocaust Museum, we laid our heads down listening to the Jerusalem sounds, waiting for our last day. Last day, baby, let's go! Let's go! Time to learn about some Jesus one more time! Woo! We solemnly start the day off in the Garden of Gethsemane. A cool little garden where Jesus was arrested, but before that he came here to pray. This place was quiet despite being surrounded by the busy Jerusalem streets, and we did a lot of reflecting here. Next to the garden there was the Church of All Nations, a big beautiful church that had this massive mural on the outside facing the Temple Mount. I don't have many snarky comments for this area because honestly, a lot of this Jerusalem trip is like, this is where this might have happened. No, like this is the Garden of Gethsemane. And I'm sure if I looked hard enough, I would probably find dried blood on the ground. Then we were headed to the house of Caiaphas, where Jesus was most likely held for a period of time before he was put on the cross after he was arrested. And hopefully you're seeing a pattern here just a little bit. Here is signified where Jesus denied Jesus 3 times by this statue. Next we went to the upper room, and before you ask, yes, it was on the 2nd floor. This is also the place of the Last Supper, and like the Last Supper happened in the upper room before Jesus was arrested. Yeah, I know we kind of went out of order, but it's the most convenient order because you just go back and forth. But nonetheless, we were literally going from place to place, the same places Jesus went to on his last day. But you know what Jesus didn't do on his last day? Shop at the local markets. Woo, let's go. You know me by this point. I love soaking it all in, all the local and normal things within Jerusalem. We only had 15 minutes to go around and shop. Honestly, nothing really interests me. But I did talk to this one Jewish guy running this sports store. I wanted to get a Houston Rockets logo printed on a shirt, but in Hebrew. That would have been such a flex to go home with. But alas, I didn't have time. Pastor Josh yelled at me to get a move on. But for what it's worth, I have a little story about this. I talked to this guy for like 15 minutes about basketball, and he was actually, when I walked in, watching the highlights from the game from the night before, because while we were there, the NBA playoffs were going on. And for some odd reason, I realized that America influences other countries in so many ways that we don't realize. Like here this guy was running an Israeli sports store in the city of Jerusalem, filled with American sports teams logos like basketball and football and all this other merchandise, who is watching the Lakers playoff highlights because in Israel, normal NBA games start at like 4 or 5 a.m. there. The dude said KD, Harden, and Chris Paul are all washed, but he liked Russell Westbrook and his athleticism. Look at that, 2 guys thousands of miles away from each other connecting through the NBA. Just crazy, just crazy. Next, we got something crazy for you. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And just by the name, it sounds like the Pope lives here. But somehow it contains something even better. The very, very place where Jesus was put on the cross, where he was laid after he died on the cross, and then his burial tomb. All in one place. Crazy, right? Now, honestly, I couldn't tell you if this church was actually being legit about their claims or that it was all symbolic like it kind of has been. But looking back at these golden structures and imagery, I don't think they were messing around, especially with that name, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. This gotta be the place. We did a bit of walking around through the streets of Jerusalem, like the old city, like within the walls. Such a pretty town. I can see why numerous people groups want to take it over. Second to last, we went to the Garden Tomb, and this is a big deal, so buckle up. So in this place, we see a legitimate contender for where Jesus was actually crucified and buried. He was put up on the cross at Golgotha, or the place of the skull, a place on the outside of Jerusalem on the roadside where people could publicly see these crucifixions. And funny enough, this place that we were visiting, there was a bus transportation center right next to it. The rocks kind of lined up to where they would kind of look like a skull, and that's pretty much why they think the crucifixion happened here. And about 30 yards away, down a couple stairs through the garden, there's a quote-unquote tomb where you can go in and see where Jesus might have been buried, or at least a tomb that represents one that Jesus would have been buried in. In the tomb, there's a specific place for the body, but also preparing the body and all the decorations and spices that were part of Jewish culture when someone is buried. Super, super cool. It was wild to see the difference in beliefs between the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the garden tomb. In the garden, we shared communion and moved on to the next and final place of our Jesus journey. The Pool of Bethesda. Here's where Jesus healed a paralyzed man. The pool, or this area, looked kind of odd because there were ruins. It seemed like Atlantis had just been uncovered, but underneath there's a reservoir filled with water, so take that as it be. Next to the pool was St. Anne's Church, where we as a congregation sang Amazing Grace. Kind of corny, but there's not really a better way to end the trip reflecting on Jesus' life and his miracles than to sing Amazing Grace in a church. After that, we went back to our hotel and chilled out until it was time to go home. We flew from Tel Aviv Airport over to Istanbul, Turkey, and then from there to Dulles International Airport. And then from there, we drove back down to the church and we got in about 2 p.m. All in all, I love my time in Israel. It was very cool to put things in perspective for my small American Baptist Christian brain and actually touch and experience history that I have been taught all my entire life. It was truly a culmination of the scriptures that I have read and known for every day of my life, and now standing where Jesus stood, eating what Jesus ate, touching what Jesus touched, seeing what Jesus saw, walking where Jesus walked. It was truly an eye-opening experience. Nonetheless, I love my time in Israel. I thank my parents and church for taking me. I hope to go back someday. And I hope you learned something or saw something or heard something new and different and interesting. That was kind of the main goal of this project. Thank you guys so much for listening, watching, having fun with me as I reflect back on my time in the Holy Land. I appreciate you guys. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video or podcast episode.